everyone, Synth Dog here. Just want to do a quick patch tutorial for the DX7, showcasing its ability to sound like an analog polysynth. Now, if you're like me, you probably can't afford to just go out and buy an analog polysynth. I'd love to, but they tend to run about 10 times what I paid for this thing. So this is what we've got to work with. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Juno line of synths, and I've always wanted to be able to get that tone. I don't think you'll ever be able to perfectly replicate that through a DX7. I don't think that's possible, but I've been able to create something that sounds a little bit like an analog sawtooth pad using what I've got here. So I'm not going to go in depth as to exactly how I did this. I'm mainly just going to show you what parameters you need to set to recreate this sound yourself. But if you're interested, I'll link a couple videos here from a DX7 tutorial series that I used to figure out how to make some basic waveforms with this thing while being economic with the operators that we have. Because of course this only has 6, which when it came out was groundbreaking, but now is a little bit limiting. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is, of course, select an initialized patch. I've got one on this cartridge here that we can use. And of course, as you probably already know, if you're watching this video, the DX7 operators are only capable of producing sine waves. If they could produce sawtooth waves, then that'd be a lot easier. We could just use an algorithm like number 32, where we've got 6 carriers laid out all in a row. But that's not possible with what we have. So there are 3 main ways to create a sawtooth wave using operators on a DX7. The first is the most simple. It is to essentially just use a feedback loop on a carrier and feed it back into the sine, and you'll end up with a decent approximation of a sawtooth wave. But there's really only one algorithm that works with, and if we were to use that, we'd end up with 5 other sine waves. So I'm going to be using the other 2 methods, which involves stacking 3 operators and stacking 2 operators, and I'm going to be using algorithm 19. And the reason I'm using algorithm 19 is because you have a 3 operator stack on one side that allows us to create one form of sawtooth wave, and then you have a branching operator with a feedback loop that we can use to modulate 2 carriers and create 2 of the same sawtooth sound. So let's go ahead and get started with our initialized patch. The first thing we're going to need to do is to change our algorithm. So we're going to hit edit 7. I'm using a DX7 II FD. If you're using an original DX7, these instructions will, but the numbers and exact buttons that I'm saying are probably going to be different. Anyways though, so we're going to be using algorithm 19. So I'll go ahead and set that. No change, still just a sine wave, because the only operator that's on is operator 1. We're going to fix that soon. Next thing we're going to do is transpose from C3 down to C2. That's going to give us some lower bass notes once we've got the sawtooth waves program. And the final thing we need to do in this menu is to change our feedback level to 7. No change, but it'll apply in a minute. So let's go ahead and start setting our levels. First thing I'm going to do is go to oscillator here, which is of course going to bring up our menu for setting the frequencies of the oscillators. We're not going to be changing any frequencies, but I just like to start here because it gives us our view of which oscillators are currently on. So I'm going to turn off 4, 5, and 6, and then we can go over into the output level menu, which is under number 10, and we can select operator 1 using the 1 button. We're going to set its level to 90, which is going to make this wave a little bit quieter. Now we're going to use the 3 operator stack to create an approximation of a sawtooth wave. Now you can get a pretty decent approximation of a sawtooth wave, but because of the way I'm doing this, I'm actually going to be more approximating a square wave to give us a little bit more high end. So the way we do that is using operators 2 and 3 as modulators on the carrier. First value we need to set is the level for operator 2. So we're just going to press 2, and then we're going to set the level to 75. And that gives us this noise. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing for operator 3. Just going to press 3, and we're going to set the level to 78, which is going to give us sort of a square wave tone. Now we could approximate a sawtooth wave better by dropping this level down a bit to around 60. But because we're going to be mixing that in with other carriers, I found it's better to just put the level at 78 and use a square wave to mix in. Okay, so now that we've got that set, let's go set our other levels. Our other two carriers are 4 and 5, and our branching modulator is number 6. So I'm just going to turn on number 4 and turn off 1, 2, and 3, and you'll hear nothing because we have no level set. So I'm going to go ahead and set the level for 4 the same way we did. Press number 10 and then 4, and then we're going to set that level to 99. And we got another sine wave, but let's turn that into a sawtooth using our feedback loop and our modulator. So we already set our feedback level to 7. So all we need to do is set the level for operator number 6. So we can do that. Just press 6 and we're going to set that level to 78, which is going to give us a sort of sawtooth tone. I forgot to turn it on. You also need to turn it on. Press 22 to do that. Now it should give us a sawtooth tone. So that's pretty decent. Let's turn on operator number 5 and then set its output level by pressing 10 and then pressing 5 and setting it to 99. And this should just give us a little bit of more amplitude out of that. Pretty decent. So now we can turn on all 6 operators, including 1, 2, and 3, and then we can give that a listen. It's not bad. What would a sawtooth sound be without playing jump? Anyways, though, as you may have noticed, we have no velocity sensitivity. So if I just barely press this, it's the same volume as if I wail on it. So that's not really good because that's not going to be good when we're using this as a pad. So let's go ahead and dial in some sensitivity. And the way we're going to do that is press 11. And then we need to set the sensitivity for our carriers, which are operators 1, 4, and 5 on our algorithm. So we're just going to press 1 and you're going to set velocity on each of these to 4. So we do that for operator 1, operator 4, and operator 5. So now that we've got that, we should have velocity sensitivity going on, which allows us to really hit the bass notes and then have the chords sort of suspended on top. So that's pretty good, but you may be wondering to yourself, well, what do we do about a filter? What if we want it to sound a little bit warmer? And to that I say the DX7 doesn't have a filter, but we do have a workaround for that. And it's using the modulation wheel over here. So right now it's of course wide open filter, really bright. Let's fix that. And this solution is from the same series of videos. I'll link all those videos down in the description. But what we need to do is press 25, which will bring up our modulation wheel menu. And then we're going to set EG bias to 99. Now that's not going to do anything immediately, because we need to configure how that's going to affect each operator. So let's start with our more obvious ones. We need to press 11 for sensitivity, and I'm just going to turn off operators 1, 2, and 3 so we can hear better. So for all these operators, we're going to have to set the AMS value, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to 3 for all of them, but I'm going to leave the first 3 off so you can hear how it affected things. So no big change, but when I turn this modulator wheel, you'll hear a filter sort of emulation. So that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and set the other 3 operators. Same value, of course, just AMS to 3 for all of them. That's pretty good. That sounds like a pretty decent approximation of a filter to me. Of course, we'll never get the full analog sweep sound. There's no resonance. We can't overdrive it. But for what we're doing, it's good enough. Now you may be saying to yourself, that doesn't really sound like a pad, and I'd have to agree with you. So the way we can fix that is by using our envelope generators for each of the operators. That's important while we're doing this, if we're fading the carriers out, because everything's set to immediately release right now. That's the fourth portion of the envelope, and it's set to 99. So if I release, the note turns off immediately. So we want that to fade out a bit, but it's important that we also make our modulators fade out, because if we don't do that, we're just going to return back to the sine wave of the carrier. I'll show you what that sounds like real quick. So I've turned off everything but operators 4 and 6. 4 is our carrier, 6 is our modulator, and that's just going to give us a sawtooth wave. Okay, so if I set the envelope generator for only the carrier, it's going to do this. What's happening there is the modulator is cutting off immediately and the carrier is just returning to outputting a sine wave. So we need to also dial in the release portion of the envelope for the modulator. And the way we're going to do that is have the modulator have a longer release than our carrier. But first, let's dial in the carrier. So that's R4. You set R4 to 44 on operator 4. Gosh, that's a lot of 4s. But we're going to go over to operator 6 and set R4 to 0. So that's starting to sound more like a pad. If we turn oscillator 5 back on, we can go and set its R4 value to 44 as well. And of course, it's being modulated by the branch from operator 6. So we don't need to worry about the release portion of the envelope for the modulator of operator 5 because we've already done that. But now we should have this. All right, so let's do the same for operator 1. If we go over there, we can set its release to 44, and it's being modulated by operators 2 and 3, so we can set both of them to 0. And now if we make sure all of our operators are on, it sounds like this. So anyways, it's not perfect, and my playing is even less perfect, but it does sound analog, a lot more analog than the default patches on the DX7, which I mean, don't sound bad, you know, you can always just, what the frick. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I might be making this into a series. I don't know. I just kind of enjoy programming this thing and I'm trying to learn how to do it myself. So just felt like sharing some of my progress and how to make your DX7 sound a lot more like an analog polysynth. But I'll link those videos in the description. Go check them out. And that little chord sequence I was playing was actually a song by a friend of mine. So I'll link that as well. But thanks for watching and have a great day.